For the past several months, Disney and the mainstream media have been doing everything in their power to desperately try to protect the live-action Little Mermaid. From the very first teaser trailer all the way up until opening weekend, we saw the media run cover for them. We saw them try to make excuses, try to say, well, if you don't like this movie, you're just review bombing it because you're a toxic racist. That's the only possible explanation. But now even the mainstream media is being forced to look at the reality, look at the box office numbers, and even though they tried to pretend like the opening weekend was some sort of success, despite it coming in under projections domestically and it flopping internationally, now the reality is slowly setting in. Little Mermaid reels in $95 million three-day box office opening, but is sinking overseas. And yes, despite them trying to say, well, it's just review bombing that's making it bad overseas, the reality is internationally, it's doing terribly. It is flopping internationally. And for this movie, with this budget, it needs to do big things, or at the very least, have an incredible domestic box office run. But unfortunately, that doesn't look like it's in the cards. We just got the second weekend projections for The Little Mermaid. This would have been something that needed to have at least around a 50% hold or better, but that doesn't look to be the case. A 61% drop right now is the projected drop for The Little Mermaid. Now, again, these are just projections. They could change a little bit, certainly. The Little Mermaid, $37 million second weekend, up against Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, which is looking to do huge, huge numbers. But you can see 61% drop. Now, when you look at these Disney live-action remakes, you can't usually expect them to drop the same way as a superhero movie or anything like that. But the fact that this is now getting the 60% range, that's closer to one of these big superhero drops that a lot of people are thinking about. Really, the comparison is Aladdin. This is a movie that is facing a lot of comparisons because another Disney live-action remake, one that did very similar domestic opening weekend numbers, but had an incredible overseas run. And right now, Little Mermaid is not even projected to get half of the overseas run that something like Aladdin had. But look at its second weekend, a 53% hold, almost a 50% hold for Aladdin in its second weekend, gave it those really good legs at the domestic box office. Already, we're seeing that that is not the case for The Little Mermaid. And when I told you that the mainstream media is actually starting to talk about this, here it is. Little Mermaid swimming against strong tides at overseas box office, leaving break even in question. Yes, that's so crazy. It's almost like we've talked about this for months. It's almost like we've mentioned this over and over and over again. We were told, no, that's crazy. Then we had a $250 million budget revealed. And now, for the first time, we're hearing what the marketing is, according to sources, a $140 million marketing campaign. I guessed right around 150. Looks like I was pretty damn close with all the stuff that's out there. So that's $390 million that they have invested in this thing. And again, I'll remind everyone, the money that you receive at the box office, say a movie makes $500 million at the box office, the theaters get around half of that. Realistically, about 55 to maybe even 60% of the domestic box office goes to the studios, whereas 40% of the international box office goes to the studios. The theaters get to keep the rest. So yes, we have been talking about this for a long time. In theory, this is something that probably needed to make around $750, maybe even $800 million to break even. And it looks like that is now the reality. Now, ironically, this is written by the same person who tried to do damage control for Black Adam and put some very misleading numbers for the Black Adam budget to try to justify why it broke even. And the funny part is, even in this, where they acknowledge it's going to have a problem breaking even, their break-even point is so ridiculously low because they're using projections from Disney that over the course of its lifetime, we're projecting The Little Mermaid will have nearly $250 million in home video and rentals. And of course, we're going to pay $100 million to put it on Disney+. These are some of the ways that Disney's leaking to the press in order to make it look like this movie might actually somehow break even, when in reality, when we now have these numbers, when we know what they've spent on it, it's a nightmare for them. And with these poor legs of the domestic box office, this was the only way it could be saved, since internationally, it's a flop. Everyone's now admitting it's a flop internationally, has no hope internationally, especially in places like Asia. It's not going to bring in this money. It needed to have a massive, massive domestic run, much better than this opening weekend it had. And already it's going to fall behind the Aladdin domestic box office pace. All of this spells disaster for Disney. It's almost like you could see this coming all along. What do you guys think about this? Let me know in the comments section below. Projected to have a big drop in the second weekend, which is more bad news for Disney and their race swap Little Mermaid. Smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notifications, share this video out there, and I'll talk to you later.